Bienvenidos. Welcome, everyone. How are you doing today? You might recognize the friendly face I have with me today. His name is Brad. And if you've been watching Mexico Relocation Guide for a while, you may have seen him in one of our previous videos that we did. Brad was an awesome guest that we had a couple of months ago, and he shared his life living in La Paz in the state of Baja California Sur. So today, I wanted to invite him back onto the channel, have a little bit more of a, just more conversational approach today to just be able for you guys to ask him your questions and not so much, the questions that we asked him on that previous video, for you guys to be able to ask Brad all your most pressing questions about living in La Paz, what it's like to move to Mexico. Brad is from the United States. So, for those of you who are thinking about moving from the US to Mexico, maybe you have some questions. Like yesterday, for example, we had a live stream where we covered a lot of just questions that the audience had. And, some people asked about banking, whether they keep their bank accounts in the United States or if they open one up in Mexico. And Brad was very kind to interject and just share what he does personally. So if you guys have questions for Brad, start asking them now. I'm going to introduce you guys to the channel. If you're new around here, my name is Mariana, and you are watching Mexico Relocation Guide. We do these videos to help you understand, not only from my perspective, what it's like to move to Mexico, but from also our guest perspective, because ultimately Mexico is a huge country, and it's completely different to live in Playa del Carmen than it is in La Paz, than it is to Puebla or Ajijic or Puerto Vallarta or Mexico City or somewhere else, right? Like they're completely different perspectives. And then obviously every person has their own experience. So I'd like to invite guests like Brad so that you guys can understand from somebody like Brad what his experience is like, and then just get as many perspectives as you can. That way you can determine if you see yourself living in Mexico, or maybe if you want to research more about that city that that person lives in. So thank you so much for being here today, Brad.
Thanks for having me.
And all of you watching at home, thank you all so much for being here too and sharing your evening with us. I see that you have a couple of people saying hi to you, Brad. Mark is here with us today.
Oh yeah, hi Mark.
I take it you know him.
Yeah, actually, he lived in the same apartment complex where I live, and he's coming back in February.
Oh, right on. Well, let's go Spartans.
Yeah.
Hi, Laura. Thank you so much for being here today. From Virginia, somebody visiting us today from Virginia. Tim, thanks for being here. We have a lot of really good questions. Go ahead and putting your questions in. I do have a couple of questions that I'm going to ask Brad as we get this conversation going. But of course, I'm going to take questions from the audience. So Brad, why don't you just introduce yourself and let us know, when did you move to Mexico?
Okay, I arrived in La Paz on Christmas Day, actually, in December of 2023. I've for a long time I've had ideas of retiring overseas. And in the last 5 years, I retired about 5 years ago, living in Michigan. And during that time, I went to Costa Rica. That's a popular retirement destination, and checked that out. And last year, I went to Portugal. That's another country that has good retirement programs. And but I've spent my whole life visiting Mexico. I've probably been here at least 25 times in the last 40 years or so, both for pleasure and a lot on business. So I'm very familiar with Mexico and Mexican culture. And my 2 kids and 2 grandkids live in Phoenix. So one thing that was appealing about La Paz in particular is it's an easy shot up to Phoenix to visit family. My original plan was a couple months in La Paz and a couple months in Mazatlan and other cities in Mexico, and then decide where I wanted to stay on a longer term basis. But I just like La Paz so much, I don't have a good reason to leave here. And part of why I've stayed through the summer is see if I could take the summer heat here. And I did all right with it. And you kind of learn to modify lifestyle, get out early in the morning and do things you need to do. And the air conditioning in the afternoon. I have a pool here at the apartment complex that I live in. So kind of every afternoon, 3 or 4 o'clock, I'm in the pool, and actually this video is cutting into my pool time. So, but La Paz has just been a good fit for me. I like the size of the city. It's big enough that it has everything you need, nice supermarkets, good hospitals, but it's not as big as like, Guadalajara or Puebla or certainly Mexico City. So you can be across town in 10 or 15 minutes. And it just suits me well here. I've made a lot of great friends here. A lot of other expats, but I have a agenda, and I try hard to meet more Mexican people, and I'm making progress on that. So it's all good. Really enjoy it here.
Yeah, I think you mentioned something that I think a lot of people might like La Paz for a lot is there's a lot of get-togethers, like meetups, and particularly for the new foreigners that are in town.
Yeah.
So it's a quick way for you to get plugged in and meet some friends, especially if you are moving, by yourself, or maybe you just don't have a lot of friends in the area and you want to get out there and meet some other people. And then from there, you'll meet others.
Right. It branches out, and there's a lot of ample opportunities. Tuesday night, I go to Spanglish Club night. That's one of my favorite things to do. Wednesday is a group called Baja Buddies. And then there's a bar that has open mic night after that. And I have some friends that sing every week at that. And Thursday night, there's a trivia night, and there's always other stuff going on. And so in my opinion, it would be hard not to make friends here.
Yeah. You'd have to be a real shut-in or really have to avoid people in order for you to really not have to make friends. But yeah, so if anybody at home is watching and wondering, why La Paz might be for you, or maybe something to consider, is that it's easy to make friends, particularly in like the foreigner expat meetup community. Because, making friends with local Mexicans is going to be a challenge, obviously, at the beginning, especially if you don't know anybody. You're maybe the easiest people to make friends with will be your neighbors and those that you probably see on a regular basis.
Yeah. And something I've found, there's kind of a natural selection process that people who are of the nature that want to come here, they're adventurous people. They've had an interesting life. They've probably traveled a lot. And I always think boring people just don't come here in the first place.
Yeah, so then you find other like-minded people which are
Right.
willing to go and explore other parts of Baja California Sur even, I'm sure. Yeah. We're going to get to, I see a lot of questions being posted, and trust me, we're going to get to them. Things like cost of living, why that area, what is it known for, things to do. But I want to ask Brad, why did you choose La Paz? Like, what about La Paz out of all of Mexico did you decide this is the place for me?
Well, and it's kind of funny. I mentioned I was going to try various cities, and here it is 9 months later, and I'm still here. And my kids knew my plan of going to different cities, and I told them, well, I'm staying in La Paz just because I like it here. I feel comfortable. And they said, well, you can't marry the first one you meet. And but I don't have a good reason to leave. But I will say, La Paz, a lot of activities revolve around the sea. I went snorkeling on Saturday. I've gone swimming with whale sharks, and there's beach days, and during the right time of the year, there's whale watching here, which I really enjoy. So that's a nice kind of a natural perk here. The climate, it's hot in the summertime, but I've survived, and it works for me. And maybe at some point I'll move on, but right now I don't have any plans to. And so I guess that kind of answers the question of why La Paz. And the other thing, one more point I wanted to make on it, it's a free trade zone. So there's a few less restrictions on things like bringing your foreign plated car here and driving it, and that it's a little bit of a wild west within Mexico, I think, when it comes to federal laws and things like that. So that makes it easier on some aspects too. it's not a big deal, but it's just another added perk. Like I can drive my Michigan plated car here where I couldn't drive it in the rest of Mexico because I'm a permanent resident. So some things like that are helpful too. It's
Yeah.
not the cheapest place in Mexico to live, though. It's on a peninsula, which kind of like being on an island. Everything has to be brought in here, and I'm sure I could live on 10 or maybe even 20% less going to some other parts of Mexico, even across the bay to Mazatlan. I think it'd be cheaper than here.
Yeah. Definitely. I mean, La Paz is known, it's still maybe more affordable than places like Puerto Vallarta, or maybe even, places that have a lot more tourism going to them, like maybe Playa del Carmen or Cancun.
Yeah.
But considering like all of Mexico, I do think it's considered one of the more expensive places to live in.
Right.
For this,
Cabo, which is only 2 hours away, is more expensive than here. But even if you take the cost differences out of it, La Paz is more Mexican. You go to Cabo and it's all designed for tourists and it's American. And so because La Paz is the seat of the state government for Baja California Sur, it's not quite so dependent on tourism. And the tourists that come here, I think, are slightly different. They're not the come and stay in a all-inclusive resort type. They're people that are coming to go fishing or scuba diving or enjoy nature in some way, some hiking and snorkeling and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. When you first moved to La Paz, so you ended up driving. You drove your car.
Yes.
Did you bring all your belongings in your
Yep,
car?
I left Michigan in November with everything I owned in my car, and it was the freest I've ever felt. Then I went to Phoenix, spent some time with my kids. Then my son drove down here with me, and then he flew back after that. So, yeah, so I have my American plated car here.
Yeah. So for anybody who is watching at home and might not know this, for basically there are certain parts of Mexico that are called zona libres, or free zones. Baja California Sur, Baja California is another one. Parts of Tamaulipas, parts of Coahuila, parts of Sonora, and then Quintana Roo are all free zones. So essentially, you can bring a foreign plated vehicle, whether it's from Canada or whether it's from the United States, without having to get a temporary import permit or without having to nationalize it. Basically, get it registered under the Mexican government and then get Mexican plates. You can drive it with foreign plates forever, as long as you don't leave those free zones, right? And then for people who are permanent residents, you can never get a temporary import permit to drive a foreign plated vehicle, except for in these free zones like Baja California Sur. So Brad can have his permanent residency and have his foreign plated car without ever having to get a temporary import permit for it, and without ever having to nationalize it, which saves you a ton of money.
Yeah. Now, there is one issue with that, and I haven't experienced this, but a lot of people who live here and have foreign plated cars say that it makes them a bit of a target with the police. Like I say, I'm fortunate enough to not have had that experience of being pulled over, and where there's usually a request for a bribe in some way, and so that hasn't happened yet, but maybe it will.
Yeah, and I could see why, right? Like they probably think, oh, this might be a tourist, maybe not somebody who's living here permanently. Let's see if if they know what the law is, and maybe what I can get out of them. Corruption, for sure. Police corruption in Mexico is my least favorite thing. Obviously, it's a terrible thing, but you learn to deal with it, and you learn to know that you have your rights. And obviously, I tell everybody, do not pay any bribes. Know your rights.
It's a tough issue because it's a convenient way to handle things. I know it's not right, but if you don't pay it and you say, give me the ticket, well, then they take your license plate, maybe your driver's license. You got to go to the police station maybe the next day and pay the fine and get all that back. And I mean, it's a hassle. The police don't even like to give tickets because it's more work for them. So, they'd much rather get the bribe. And I think the right thing to do is to not pay it and say, give me the ticket. Usually they won't give you the ticket anyway. but because in effect you're training them to ask for bribes by handling it that way.
Yeah. So speaking of that topic, you know, a lot of people always ask us when we do our videos, that, do you feel safe? Like, do you feel safe driving? Did you feel safe driving the entire way from the U.S. to La Paz? Do you feel safe in La
Absolutely.
Paz?
And any safety issues weren't from people robbing me or, you know, police that were going to do anything bad. Any safety issues were more along the lines of a cow wandering out in front of the road, or a goat, or, you know, an edge of the road being washed out or something like that. And even that was not a big deal. The main thing is don't drive at night for those obvious reasons of, you know, cattle in the road.
Livestock,
But
yeah.
and as far as personal safety, right now La Paz is very safe. I mean, I'm not a real nightlife kind of person, but there's been a couple times where I've been out at 2 a.m. or something like that, and never any safety issues. Something that's very attractive about La Paz is this Malecon area. It's a walkway, I mean, basically like a boardwalk type thing along the shore. And you go out at 11 o'clock at night, and there's families with kids and elderly people and everything. And that's a good gauge to see how safe it is. They're obviously not worried about it. And where I lived most recently in Michigan, I was 25 minutes from downtown Detroit, and that's the murder capital of the world. You know, there's drive-by shootings, random violence, and it's just not that way in La Paz. I couldn't feel safer than being here.
That's good to know. So for anybody wondering how large La Paz is and where in Mexico it's located, I think Google Maps is a great way for you to, you know, pull it and search it and see exactly where it's located. It's on the Baja California Peninsula, so at the very bottom of that peninsula. If you look at where Mazatlan is, it's like across the ocean from Mazatlan. But yeah, look it up on Google Maps. It's a really great way for you to see where exactly in Mexico it's located. If you want to know more about La Paz, we did a great video about it, just telling you about what neighborhoods are really good to live in, how to find rentals, like what the average cost of rentals are, things to do, the population, the weather, a lot of those things. So once this live stream is over, I highly recommend you go back to the channel and search for our video on La Paz. But let's ask Brad some of his cost of living expenses, because now that, you know, you've been in La Paz for a little while, you've had some high cost of living experiences, and now you've had some more reasonable cost of living experiences. So what I mean by that is when you first arrived in La Paz, you started renting an Airbnb, like many people on this channel who are thinking of moving to Mexico probably will do, to get their, you know, to get boots on the ground, to get to know what city they're in, to scout the area. And then Airbnb is usually going to be a higher cost because you don't know anything about the city at the time. But why don't you tell us more about that experience, Brad?
Yep. So the first 10 weeks I was here, I was in an Airbnb. It was comfortable. Wasn't cheap. That came out to about $1,000 a month, and small, kind of a limited cooking facilities. And I found this place when we first started. My friend Mark had commented on here, and he lived in this complex. So I was over at his place. So I got a chance to see it. And that's how I got connected with the landlord here. I live in a 1-bedroom kind of apartment. Sometimes I call it a house, but it's a small complex. There's 5 units here. 2 of them are 2-bedroom. Mine's a 1-bedroom, and then there's 2 studios. And I pay 18,000 pesos a month, and depending on the exchange rate, it's approximately $1,000 a month. The exchange rate has moved in my favor the last couple months, so that helps a little. And that includes all utilities, internet, water, everything. And
electricity.
It's got a great patio area where I can have, you know, dinner parties and stuff. There's a pool here, and the nice thing is it's walking distance to the Malecon. It's got a really nice kitchen, which is important for me because I like to cook and have people over for dinner. And So I was paying about the same when I was in Airbnb, but I'm getting a lot more for it now. And I even have an indoor parking place here. So a lot of places you end up parking on the street, which it's not that someone's automatically going to steal your car or something, but there's always a risk of somebody breaking into it or something. So, and I have a target budget of about $2,500 a month. I've gone over a couple months, but it's usually because of, I had like a couple weeks ago, my car broke down. I had some repairs on that, but just on an ongoing basis of things I need, the 2,500 is very doable. And I live well. I mean, I even though I like to cook and be at home sometimes, I mentioned all these different activities and clubs to go out to, and there's always a meal involved, so it costs some money, and I enjoy good food, so I'm not bashful about going to some nicer restaurants and things. And like I say, the other day I went snorkeling. That was, I think it was 2,000 pesos, so about $100 or something for a day. But it was a fantastic experience. And if you're going to come here, you got to do some of those things, or you're really missing out on what you came for. So I know there's other people here that live on $1,500 a month, and so I know that's doable, but
it's just more limiting.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's definitely doable, but I also agree it's going to be very limiting. So I think your budget, $2,500, is probably more reasonable for the standard of living that a lot of people are probably used to having back home.
Yeah, if you're on the $1,500 a month thing, you probably don't have a car here and things like that. So, but it's doable.
Yeah. Can you survive? Absolutely. Yeah. Can you live comfortably? Absolutely. It's just maybe limiting. So electricity is included.
Yep.
That's something that's not usually included in places.
And that covers everything.
Yeah, that's great. That's really great. I mean, it's all those. I mean, electricity tends to be one of the higher utilities that people pay for in areas that are really hot. What did they ask you for when you first rented this place? Did they ask you for
handshake?
A handshake?
There's no lease. When I came, I said I told them I'd probably be here for 6 months, and then just a couple weeks ago, I said to them, my plans have changed, and just assume I'm going to be here indefinitely. And if that changes, I'll let you know. And it's a very nice family that owns the place, and they're easy to work with. And I didn't have to like get a vowel or somebody to vouch for me or anything like that. I think because I had met him through my friend Mark that lived here previously, and he kind of maybe vouched for me and said, "Oh, he's a good guy, so you can trust him." So
yeah. Well, thanks, Mark. You really hooked it up. That's awesome.
That's
right. So he shared some of his monthly expenses. So he talked a little bit about his rental. What about things like your grocery bill? Let's start with food.
Yeah.
How are you seeing that as compared maybe even to Michigan?
Oh, well, it's a lot less than Michigan, maybe half. And I like probably every 2 weeks I have a dinner party with 5 or 6 people over. So it's, that adds some expense, but it's something I enjoy. And generally I can cook for 4 people in my house for what it would cost to go out to a nice restaurant. So, it's kind of a little bit of a wash that way. But I should know specifically how much I spend on food. It's probably around $450 and another $450 for going out to restaurants during the month. And I mentioned this nice area, the Malecon. There's a lot of good restaurants along there, but the farther you move away from the Malecon, the cheaper things are. And so I've discovered some really good restaurants that are back in the city more, 10 blocks back in away from the Malecon, that are just as good and a lot cheaper. And you feel good because you're probably giving somebody some business. It's a local family more than a business, So that's been a fun process. And so with one of the expat groups, I started a WhatsApp group called La Paz Summer Survivors. And
Okay.
we organized a lot of evenings out and all kinds of activities through that. And we've gone to some of these restaurants that are back farther in the town. And so I've been able to deliver, groups of 15 people at times to some of these restaurants. Usually I go there first and scope it out and explore it a little bit. And then if it's something I think that the people would like that are in that group, I talk to the owner, make arrangements so they know there's a big group coming, and that's been fun too.
I bet they really appreciate that. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
bringing them a ton of new business. That's
Yeah.
awesome. That's wonderful. Plus, you're also showing some people some hidden spots that they might not know about had they
Yeah.
not been outside of this touristic area, right?
Right.
Yeah. A lot of people are saying hello to you, so just
Okay.
FYI in the comments, I'm reading some greetings to you. So you mentioned something about your cost of living, your budget being $2,500 a month. And I know that a lot of people are going to come at me at the comments like, well, yeah, you can live on $2,500 a month, but to qualify for residency, you need more. So did you get your residency before you retired? Like when you went to the consulate?
Yes, it was based on financial solvency. I went to the Mexican consulate in Detroit. Actually, I was planning on just going to ask some questions, but I did take bank statements and things like that when I was there. They said, well, we could process you right now if you want to. And I did. And I was in and out in an hour and approved for permanent residency. And then I you have to, after that, you have to come to Mexico within 6 months for canje. And I came, and I did have an immigration facilitator. She's great. If anybody wants her name, I'd be happy to share that. And I did have to go to the immigration office, but just for a picture. And then a couple days or a week later, she showed up and gave me my card. So it was a very painless process. I highly recommend a facilitator because they're playing in this arena all the time. They know all the rules, they know the people, and you could probably do it yourself, but it's going to cause some pain, bureaucratic pain and paperwork and things like that. And you'll go and they say, well, you don't have this paper, and you go and get that, and they say you don't have that. But so pay the money for the facilitator. They're not that expensive in the grand scheme of things.
Definitely. I highly agree with you. And I believe that the facilitator that you worked with, you got off the guide.
Yes.
Yeah.
Her name's Jimena Ruiz, and she's great. And the other thing I will mention about that is we've kind of remained friends, and it's more than just the one time, at least with her, it's more than just the one-time transaction. She kind of, when she has new clients come into town, she'll introduce them to previous clients and help them get plugged into the social networks here. In fact, last Saturday, I went snorkeling with her and another client of hers that, and so it's just something that she does. It's a little bit more of a personal touch too.
Yeah, so I highly recommend hiring an immigration facilitator as well. And we have recommendations all across Mexico, not only La Paz, but we have them all over. I mean, Los Cabos, Rosarito, Ensenada, Tijuana, and Puebla, Guadalajara, Querétaro, San Miguel de Allende, Ajijic, Guadalajara, I already mentioned Guadalajara, Puerto Vallarta, Playa del Carmen, Cancun, Mérida. I mean, all over Mexico, we have some immigration facilitators that you guys can work with. So we've done all that vetting for you. And, if you buy the complete Mexico Relocation Guide, you can get access to that directory of contacts that we have done some vetting for you and already.
Right. And
we only list people that we find to be very reputable in what they do.
Yeah, and if I could comment on the usefulness of the guide, it wasn't just the immigration facilitator that I found in that. There's probably 6 or 7 other contacts that I have from the guide that, like Mariana says, have been vetted. I bought insurance from one, and there was a guy that when I was planning on moving on to Mazatlan, a guy there that I contacted through the guide that answered some questions and helped me with some things too. And then there were others. I just can't think of them off the top of my head.
That's awesome. I'm glad that you got a lot of use out of it, Brad.
Mhm.
So somebody's wondering, like, what can they expect from local police and state police? I mean, I think you talked about a little bit about that already. Driving a foreign vehicle, um, I think you mentioned how, like, some people have mentioned that having foreign license plates might make you a bit of a target for bribes. It hasn't happened to you personally, but any other tips that you have for what to expect when driving in Mexico?
Yeah, if you do have interaction with the police, which I have had some, just at routine stops, not where they pulled me over, but where I went through a checkpoint, be respectful, be polite, and I think that's a good rule wherever you are. And The local police here that are around the Malecon, I walk there every morning, so I say good morning to them, things like that, and they the few interactions that I've had, they've been very respectful and helpful even. So I mean, they're people too. They don't. It's not that they're out wanting to create conflict or anything. I'm sure their day's better if they don't have to get in a high conflict situation with somebody.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, know your rights, right? Like, if you're getting pulled over because you did something unlawful, ask for the ticket.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you're getting pulled over because you think you're being shaken down, yes, I agree with Brad. It is like the most convenient thing to just pay whatever shakedown they're asking for. But the right thing, or to know your rights, is to know that you can ask for a ticket and be on your way.
And you probably won't get the ticket, but
And
if
you
you,
probably won't get the ticket.
yeah,
Yeah,
because
if
they
you're
don't want
really
you to work
insistent
for it
about it.
either. Hmm.
Somebody wants to know when, in your opinion, is the best time to visit La Paz?
Yeah, November through April. It's hot in the summertime. October's hurricane system. We haven't had any real big storms come through this year so far.
Yeah.
But it's for me, it's a very comfortable temperature through those winter months here, and it's also whale season, so that's an added benefit. You can see a lot of whales. I mean, I've gone out a couple times to see the gray whales, to see the whale sharks, and it's just incredible. Especially someone who grew up in Michigan, you didn't see whales in the Great Lakes.
Yeah.
So um, if you really like the heat, come in July and August, but that's for me that's not the most comfortable time.
Yeah. If you're thinking of moving there, maybe you would make two trips, right? One when it's really comfortable, so you can really get to enjoy that part first, and then the second time maybe when it's not so comfortable, just to see if you can actually bear the heat. Because I know there's a lot of people who really think, oh, I want to live in a really, really warm area, and then they get to La Paz or they get to other parts of Mexico and they're like, wow, you weren't kidding, it's hot.
Hmm. Yeah, and it doesn't cool off a lot at night either. If it did, and you had a couple hours then in the morning, but I get up and walk at 6:30 or 7 in the morning, and I come back and I'm soaking wet because it's hot even then.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have any pets?
Well, funny you should ask. I inherited a cat with the house.
Oh, okay.
My first night here, I woke up and there was a cat here, and I'm like, how did she get in here? And I took her and I put her outside and closed the door and came back in. And 5 minutes later, she was here again. There's a window open in the kitchen, and I think as far as she's concerned, I moved into her house, and then she went over. This all was the first morning I was here. She went over and started pawing at the cupboard in a certain spot, and I went and opened it, and sure enough, there was cat food in there. So
Oh.
I don't really like cats, but now about 6 months here, we're becoming friends, and so I have a cat. Her name's Coca, and but she doesn't have a tail. I don't know if they cut it off or what, but anyway, no tail. So my joke is that her name's Coca sin cola, and sin, for those of you who don't speak Spanish, sin means without, and then cola means tail. So Coca without a tail, but kind of like Coca-Cola too.
Yeah. That's adorable. But you didn't move down with any pets.
No, I would like to get a dog, and I will at some point, but it's work and all that, so I've been putting it off for a while.
Yeah, it's certainly a lot of pets in Mexico that you can rescue, and certainly
Sure.
dogs.
Yeah.
Hmm. Something that you mentioned, occupying your time doing a lot of outdoor activities, spending time with either friends, starting a new group. Um, these are all really good ways to occupy your new time as a new retired person. I think a lot of people have a really hard time once they are newly retired with all this new time that they have. So what is your advice for somebody who like might be in that situation and they're thinking like, what am I going to do with my time? How can they get involved? How can they occupy their time?
Yeah,
What events
there's
can they join?
there's some good charitable organizations here. I'd say do some vetting though to make sure they're legit and everything. There's certainly you had mentioned the animal rescue issue here. There's some that help raise money for sterilization of animal street dogs and things like that too. And so there's that. I know some of the people I'm friends with get involved with an orphanage here and go regularly there to, I don't know, teach high school kids auto mechanics and things like that. So there's a lot of opportunities like that. There's a few English language church groups here. Of course, lots of if you speak Spanish, there's a wider network available to you. So if that's something that's important to you, it's a good place to meet people and have your maybe spiritual needs met. But usually they have some charity initiatives too, where they raise money for a certain school. Some of the restaurants in town will have programs for fundraisers where they want you to bring children's clothes or something. They prefer them to be new, not used clothes. But when those things come up, if I'm in Soriana or one of the supermarkets that also have kids' toys and clothes, it's easy to pick up an outfit or something and drop it off at that restaurant. And they welcome people's involvement in that. So, and then there's also a lot of nature activities, like there'll be groups that organize to go clean up a beach. But for me, it's been satisfying just getting to know new people here, and everybody has a life story, and even on a one-on-one basis, there's opportunities to get involved with people maybe in need in some other way. I went 3 times to try to donate blood. And there's kind of an interesting system here. If you're getting an operation, you have to go and find people to donate your blood type.
Yeah.
And so there's that's something, and that's another way to connect with somebody that you wouldn't otherwise know, because usually the donor or the recipient is either asking for donation or there's someone in their family is organizing it. So I met a really nice guy through that activity that I stay in touch with.
Yeah. Yeah. Unlike a lot of, hospitals in the United States or even in Canada, I assume, most hospitals in Mexico don't have these blood banks where they just, have like endless amounts of blood. I mean, some of them do, and they do have, some amount of banks available to truly like extreme emergencies. But for the most part, yeah, like Brad said, something that you might not know for anybody of you watching at home is whenever you have a procedure done, or maybe you're going to have a baby, or whatever needs a blood transfusion, they will usually ask you to ask for donations to then replenish
Right.
the same blood bank for your type of blood. And then in some cases they might even allow just other types of blood, just to be able to replenish that bank. But especially if your type of blood is just a very rare kind, or they just don't have a lot of reserves of it, then you need to find donors. So yeah, it's something that people need to consider. Speaking of medical, what do you do for medical? Do you have insurance? Are you basically just paying out of pocket right now? What do you personally do?
I have emergency medical coverage that covers, if I have a heart attack or in a car accident. For smaller stuff, I can pay out of pocket and it's pretty reasonable. I haven't had any big issues. I did go for just a checkup, and I'm on some medications, which are a lot cheaper here than in the U.S. So I can pay out of pocket for that. I think for me, that's a workable solution. I'm not worried about $1,000 bill that I have for medical care, but I want some protection against a $50,000 issue. And I have that. And, I've looked at some other ideas, and, fortunately I haven't had to use the insurance. So that's usually when the real test of it, but it was from a reputable source. So I'm confident it's legitimate. And
Mind
I've
sharing
gone,
how much you pay for it monthly or
yes,
maybe a year?
paid, I think it was $780 for 12 months for emergency medical. And if you go to one of the approved facilities, it covers from $1, so there's no copay. And if you go to a non-network one, I think there's a $5,000 deductible.
Got it.
But that gives you protection on the high end for that too. And
Got it.
just something I'll share while we're on the topic of insurance. I did buy some Mexican car insurance, fairly comprehensive. I have a 2016 Jeep Cherokee, and that was $400 for a whole year. And in the U.S., I was paying more than that per month for insurance on a car. And
Wow.
that is, like I say, it's comprehensive. If someone steals my car, they pay me for it. So.
Yeah. Which, by the way, for anybody wondering, you have to have Mexican insurance if you're driving a car in Mexico. Doesn't matter if it's in the free zone. Doesn't matter if it's not in the free zone. Doesn't matter if it's a foreign plated car. Your foreign insurance will not cover you in Mexico. It's very important for you to have it, especially if you're in an accident. So keep that in mind. Especially even if you're just driving for a couple of days, you have to have Mexican insurance. Yeah, this is a good question. So how do you feel about not being fluent in Spanish? Like somebody's wondering, is it possible to live there if you only speak English?
It's possible. It's certainly doable. I know plenty of people here in La Paz that probably speak 10 words in Spanish, which is kind of a shame. But the more you know, the more you'll enjoy life here, and the more comfortable you'll be. I'm pretty fluent in Spanish. I enjoy using Spanish, and I think that earns me some points with some local vendors. And I know my landlord speaks English, but I always talk to him in Spanish. And that's just, to me, it's part of the culture and everything here, and we all ought to strive to do what we can to learn some of it. But like I say, there's some people that just have a block and can't learn the language, or think they can't learn the language, and they get by just fine.
Yeah. Yeah, you just might be more limited on how you can do your daily interactions, from
Right.
going to the local market to even going to a hospital. You can't count on everyone there being bilingual. So you might have to rely on a friend that can translate things for you, which would be more limiting. So somebody's wondering, do you live, maybe this is a little bit too personal, but I will kind of change this question a bit to ask, they want to know, are you living solely on monthly retirement or just living off of Social Security? But are you drawing Social Security?
No, I'm 60 years old, so I can't
you
get
might be
Social
too young.
Security. I'm drawing out of a retirement account, and for now, and that works for me.
Yeah. What I wanted to ask also, if you were drawing off of Social Security, which I will go ahead and answer, is if anybody's wondering if you can collect your Social Security in Mexico, yes, you can. So, you can absolutely have it deposited into either your U.S. bank account or your Mexican bank account. So yes, you can draw your Social Security even while living abroad. And for you, I know, Brad, that yesterday we had this conversation kind of briefly online about how you access your money personally.
Yeah, so I think something there that you need to think about: if you're renting, it might be different than if you own a house. I think if you own property here, you're probably not going to be able to get away without having a Mexican bank account. But for me, because I'm renting, I have a Charles Schwab account that I do most of my banking with in the United States. That's been just seamless, very easy to use. And then I also highly recommend Wise. That's a system for exchanging money. And so I just use Wise to transfer 18,000 pesos every month to my landlord's bank account. And it happens automatically. And that's, I wouldn't say it's extremely user friendly, but it works pretty well. And it takes a little bit of learning, but so that works for me. And I don't have a Mexican bank account, and I don't feel any need to have one.
Yeah.
Now, if I was paying electric bills and water bills and things like that, it might be different.
Yeah. Or if you had to pay your property taxes and
Right.
those kinds of bills that, I mean, you can do it in person in cash, but it's just so much easier if you can just do it monthly on an automatic debit, and you would need a Mexican bank account for those things.
And one more comment I had on that. There's a lot of foreigners that live here that like to have a Mexican bank account. They say, wow, you get a great interest rate on it and everything. But since the devaluation over the last 3 or 4 months, you don't hear them talking like that anymore, because they say, well, you get 10% return just in a regular savings account there. But yeah, then the peso devalues by 20%, and that 10% doesn't look so good anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's still like, it's still a good idea to think about having a Mexican bank account, I think, in the long term, especially if you are going to be buying property. It'll be very challenging to set up utilities and to be able to pay your property taxes and many other things, especially if you plan to have a long-term life in Mexico. But at the same time, I know many people like you, Brad, who you've been here not that long, but I know people who have been in Mexico for over 20 years who have never had a Mexican bank account.
Yeah.
And they just do all their banking in the US, and they just deposit their money into, their landlord's account, or they just withdraw money from ATMs, or maybe they do various things to be able to access their money without ever needing a Mexican bank account. And Charles Schwab works pretty good for you?
Pardon?
Charles Schwab works pretty good for you?
Yeah, very good. They reimburse you for any of the ATM transaction fees. End of the month, you get all that money back. I'm just looking at one question here. It's kind of more on the cultural differences that I wouldn't mind commenting on.
Sure.
But, the question is, did you find it difficult to adjust to the differences in the city's infrastructure, such as dirt roads and more relaxed rhythm of life? As far as the relaxed rhythm of life, that's a big advantage. That's one of the draws, I think, here. As far as the infrastructure, I'm comfortable with it. There's cracks in the sidewalks and things like that sometimes, but that's no big deal. And the city works. It's not bad. And I've spent a lot of time in Mexico before I moved here, so I knew what to expect. I do think the people maybe that struggle with it are people that think everything needs to be pristine, and when they see a loose wire or something, they think, well, somebody's got to fix that, or the neighbor's dog's barking, and they think they got to call the city. They're not going to do well here. You kind of have to learn to go with the local norms and culture here. But to me, that's part of the beauty of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. The slower pace of life is what a lot of people are craving. They want to get away from, the chaos and the hustle and bustle of wherever it is that they're leaving from and going to. So yeah, for a lot of people, it's just, I know many people that have been able to lose weight without really trying to lose weight, just by, walking more, for example, using public transportation more, getting out more, eating more whole foods.
Well,
but then
I can comment on that. So in 9 coming up on 10 months here, I've lost about 28 pounds, and it hasn't been all at once. It's kind of been a steady couple pounds a month going off, and I attribute it to all the things you mentioned. The weather's conducive to getting more exercise. You get out, getting fresh air. There's places to go hiking, maybe snorkeling, good exercise also. but I also think that the food is healthier, fewer preservatives in it, and here in La Paz, the seafood is great. So you tend to, at least I tend to eat more seafood here than I would otherwise. So I think all in all, it's a healthier lifestyle.
Yeah. The weather, yeah, I hadn't even mentioned that, and you're right. A lot of people, especially if you're coming from northern U.S. or even Canada, where we're coming up on like the winter, and I know a lot of those people are like, this is my last winter here.
Yeah.
Because you're getting closed in for 3, 4, 5 months at a time.
Right, and I think, growing up in Michigan, I think the cold weather kind of triggers your body to store more carbs, and you tend to crave carbs more. Where when it's hot, not so much. That's my hypothesis anyway.
Yeah, or maybe because you're closed in so much, it's like that kind of becomes a hobby as just eating. But yeah, and to kind of extend on that, I've had even customers who tell me just from my lifestyle change, I've been able to change the medications I was taking, not only lose the weight, but also change the medications that I was taking for chronic pain, or maybe, less serious things. Obviously, if you're going to be on like, statins or things like that, maybe that's not going to change, but it might. And for a lot of people, it just depends on your lifestyle.
Yeah.
So for the people that are watching us at home, and I know we've talked a lot about the positives of living in La Paz, but I also want to be realistic and talk about maybe what are some surprises or negatives that you think people should consider.
Well, you did a very good video. I think it was a year and a half ago. I think it was 13 reasons or 10 reasons not to move to Mexico. And I think you were dead on that. So I recommend people go back and watch that video. But it was, kind of the culture of maybe people not being punctual. They tell you they're coming. I have this issue with my housekeeper, says, oh yeah, I'll be there at 10 o'clock. Well, at noon, your text her, where are you? Well, I'm on my way. And at 2 o'clock, she's still not here. And so the feeling that time has to be controlled, maybe that's something that takes some getting used to for people here. And you had also mentioned in that video that, there's some smells, the sewage treatment facilities aren't always what they're used to, what you're used to. And so when I go for a walk in the morning, there's a sewage pumping station I walk by. I know it's not going to smell good when I go by there.
Yeah.
And I think also in that video that you'd mentioned that the plumbing systems aren't set up to handle toilet paper. So usually there's a wastebasket next to the toilet where you throw your toilet paper in that. And that's not it. Most people aren't used to that. So,
yeah. And that doesn't happen everywhere. I do want to.
No, I know. And newer buildings, from what I understand, it's much less likely to have that. But I'm trying to think of some of the other issues.
Infrastructure in general, right? Like not every neighborhood is going to be equipped with like high-speed internet. Not every house is going to have that available to you.
My internet here is faster and more reliable than it was in Michigan. So
that's great. Yeah, that's great.
In 6 months in this house, I don't think it's gone out once, except for the power went out the other day for the first time, and it was out for about an hour. So obviously I didn't have internet then, but so those services have been very reliable here. I think the other thing you mentioned is the noise in Mexico, dogs barking, roosters crowing, neighbors having a party. And unless you want to live way out of town where you don't have any close neighbors, you're gonna feel some of that.
Yeah. But that's the fabric that makes Mexico so unique.
Yeah.
That's like all those things that we just talked about are one of the reasons that Mexico is unique. You're not moving to another part of the United States or Canada. It is its own country. It's completely different. And for a lot of people, that might be too much to handle. And for a lot of people, they welcome that change because they want the change, right? They want to be in a different place. They want to move to Mexico and feel like they moved to Mexico.
Right. Yeah.
Now, one thing that I've heard a couple of other YouTubers talk about in regards to La Paz is that when they traveled across other cities in Mexico, they felt this extreme friendliness and extreme warmth. And in La Paz, they felt that people were a little less welcoming and less warm at the beginning. And then once they got to know you, they were, very friendly, very warm. And of course, I'm talking about locals. So have you experienced that at all?
No, I feel very welcome here, and but it goes both ways. You can't wait for somebody to come and knock on your door and ask if you want to come out and play. You have to interact with them and engage with them as well. So, and I have traveled throughout Mexico, and I haven't felt that at all about La Paz. So I think that the other thing is, I think the city is appropriately named. La Paz means the peace, and people are very peaceful and polite and welcoming here. That's my impression anyway.
Yeah, that's been your experience so far anyway. Yeah.
Yep.
One other thing that I think maybe people talk about in La Paz, and I know this is a problem, but water shortages. And I know they happen in specific neighborhoods, not all across the city. But what has been your experience with that? Or maybe even your other friends' experience with water shortages?
I haven't had to go without water for any issues delivering water to the house. Now, the landlord left the hose on one night trying to top off the pool, and then the cistern or the tinaco went dry, and then the pump burned up, and that was kind of a hassle. But that wasn't a reliability of supply issue. I'd like to have a little more water pressure, but it's survivable. I've been at a friend's house, and they have water pressure that's as good as anything I ever had in the United States. So I think this is an older building, and so maybe the pipes are a little smaller than they should be, or something like that. But so in my specific case here, I'd like to have a little more water pressure, but I can live with what I have, and it hasn't been a problem for me, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's good. Because I know that, I know that these blanket statements are sometimes done, particularly by the media. And then it sends people into a panic that, oh, if I move there, I'm not going to have access to like daily running water. And that's absolutely not the case. For starters, a lot of homes, especially in places like Baja California Sur, other cities that have water shortages like Mexico City, most of the neighborhoods that people watching this channel are going to move to are not going to have those issues, because those neighborhoods usually have cisterns or tinacos, which are just basically water storage sheds, and they manage a lot of their own water. Even though the city does provide water to a lot of those places, they still have a backup and manage some of their own water so that they can prevent water shortages from happening. But when you hear the media talk about water shortages in some of these cities, yes, it's mostly a lot of impoverished neighborhoods that don't have these systems in place and rely solely on water from the city. So sometimes the city has to shut off water if there's not enough water in the reservoirs. Luckily, this year it's rained so much that the water reservoirs across Mexico have really filled up, and they're at a level now that people don't have to sound the alarm bells. But anyway, I just want to mention that because I know that some of you guys watching at home might read those things and say, oh, Mexico's running out of water. And while that is the case, and in some level of case, it's not entirely true for every single neighborhood in every city. So I want to finish this conversation off with one more piece of advice that you might have for the audience, and anything that you want to mention to somebody thinking about moving to Mexico.
Yeah, I would recommend coming in a couple different seasons, and maybe a couple different places within Mexico, and spend a month in those places, and it'll give you a chance to talk with other people who have gone through what you're contemplating going through, and ask if you like it. If you had to do it over again, would you do it? Ask pros and cons, and that's the best way to learn. I mean, before I came, I watched all the videos, your channel, Mariana, as well as others. But and it's interesting. Then you come and you actually start meeting the people in the videos, and you're like, hey, you're a star. And
like Brighton, for example.
Yeah, like Brighton, and but come and experience it. And I don't think you can do it in 3 days. I think you got to stay here long enough where you need to do things like maybe get your prescriptions filled, or although you can just walk into a pharmacy and get most drugs here, and do your grocery shopping, and maybe even have occasion to go visit a doctor for some reason that you have while you're here, and see how comfortable you feel. And I mean, I have absolutely no regrets. The whole experience has exceeded my expectations. And but I do say it's not for everybody. I can think of people that I know, and even in my family back in the United States, that if they came here, they'd be very uncomfortable.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's okay to have that honest conversation with yourself and to scout the area. I agree with Brad. If you can afford to stay there for at least a month or more, do it. And no amount of blogs. And I mean, I know we put out a lot of videos, but no amount of videos, no amount of blogs are going to replace the experience that you are going to have yourself for visiting a place yourself. Only you can have your personal experience of that city or cities that you're thinking of. So yeah, you can read and you can watch a lot of videos, but truly you have to soak it in yourself, and you're the only person that's going to know whether it's for you or not. So I want to thank everybody for being here. Brad, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. I think you are, obviously I see a huge smile on your face every time that I chat with you. I don't know if you were always very smiley before.
No, actually I wasn't. That's Mexico. That's what Mexico has done for me.
Well, you're always such a pleasure to talk to. I'm glad that Mexico is doing you good, and I'm glad that you're happy, and I'm glad that La Paz has been your ideal place, that you didn't even need to travel all over the place for you to find the place that felt right for you. So I'm really glad that you have found the city for you.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the opportunity to share, and I'll make some comments if I can, if I think I can add any value to any of the questions that showed up in the comments here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, we covered most of the ones that people had. There was a couple of just conversations that people had with each other on just, things that people had questions on. But I think we covered a lot. And if you want to go ahead and after this live stream, go ahead and post some comments to these questions on the live stream, by all means, go ahead.
Okay.
All right. And I hope to talk to you again, maybe in a year or so, and do an update. Maybe you'll be in La Paz, maybe you'll be somewhere else. Okay. See how you're doing.
All right. Thanks again. And thanks everybody for attending.
Yeah. Thank you all so much at home for joining us and spending your evening with us. I'll let you know when the next live stream is. Most likely it's going to be at the end of October. I'm going to be doing another Q&A just to answer some questions about mostly residency, because I know that's very top of mind for people right now, especially as we near the end of the year. So stay tuned. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, go ahead and do it. That way you know when the next live stream is scheduled. And Brad, again, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Hasta luego.